Should Americans be prepared for unemployment to go up before it goes down?
No, it's possible you're going to have a couple months where it goes up. Because, you know, one thing that happens in recoveries, George, is that people start to come back into the labor force. And that can cause the measured unemployment rate to go up temporarily. But what we expect to see, and I think most private forecasters expect this, is an economy that's gradually healing. Of course, we want to do what we can to reinforce that process, because it's not coming back as quickly as we'd like.
You say you want to reinforce that process. A lot of observers, partisan and not, look at the president's commitment to ending allowing the tax cuts on the wealthiest Americans to end as a job killer. I was speaking to Newt Gingrich. He said it is crazy to go through with this plan. Some nonpartisan economists agree. And your own CEA had put out a paper in June that said tax increases are highly contractionary. So how do you respond to those who say you're putting this fragile recovery at risk?
We're proposing to extend tax cuts that go to more than 95% of working Americans, more than 95% of small businesses across the country. We also think it makes sense to let those tax cuts that only go to 2% of the highest earning Americans in the country to expire as scheduled.
So you reject the argument that those are contractionary?
We do.
But it's still a fragile recovery. And I know the mayor of New York, you met with him on your visit here, put out a proposal over the weekend where he said, why not extend all the tax cuts for a year or two, coupled with a solid commitment for deficit reductions in the future? Why isn't that a good idea?
Well, if you extend, particularly these tax cuts that only go to 2% of the highest earning Americans, then there would be a much higher probability they'll be extended indefinitely, and that would add $700 billion to our 10-year deficits. That would be a deeply fiscally irresponsible act.
How firm is the president's commitment to this proposal? If, for example, the Congress passes an extension of the tax cuts for the wealthy, will the president veto it?
What the president believes is the best strategy for the country is to extend the tax cuts that go to more than 95% of Americans.
I know that's what the president believes is the better strategy, but what I'm asking is he going to veto any bill that extends those tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans?
He believes this is what makes sense, and I think that we'll get support for this.
I know you don't want to give a veto threat right now. That's pretty clear, but here's...
I would be happy to give veto threat on so many things, George. You have no idea.
But not this. But,
No.
but here's the problem. Speaker Pelosi has said she wants this to come before the election. I assume that's the president's preference as well?
Well, they'll have to decide. Most people don't think you're going to see the legislative outcome finished on this until after the election.
That's right, and here's the danger. You then are playing chicken up against the deadline of a January 1st increase in taxes, and we've all seen the possibility of gridlock in the Senate, which could lead to what a lot of people would consider the worst outcome, tax increases for everyone.
That would be I believe that would be a very irresponsible act for the country, and it is the responsibility of the Congress to make sure that does not happen.
Let me ask you also about the president's relationship with Wall Street. Alan Greenspan was asked about it over the weekend. Here's what he had to say.
I've never seen anything like this. I've been in and out of Wall Street since 1949, and I've never seen the type of animosity between government and Wall Street.
There does seem to be something of a Cold War between the president and Wall Street right now. And I spoke to several Wall Street executives recently, some who supported the president in the past, and they all used exactly the same phrase: he turned on us.
We had a deep obligation, the president did, to reform, to fix what was broken. There's nobody here or across the country that would argue that our system worked. They would argue it was not broken. And so our job was to make sure we put reforms in place that would prevent a crisis like this from happening. And
so
back
no apologies
again.
For the reforms.
No
How about
apologies
the rhetoric?
For this. Look, this is we're in a moment where people are still deeply unhappy about what happened to this country. We have to earn back, all of us, the confidence of the American people that where you need oversight, the government's going to do that job.
And the administration has really been caught in some ways in a vice between Wall Street and Main Street. And one of the things it sounds like I'm hearing here is that you believe Wall Street has to understand how deep that anger is out in the country.
I think that's important. But what our job is to try to do what is in the broader public interest.
Do you feel any need to deal with at least the perception problems on Wall Street? Do you feel a need to reassure Wall Street that the president is not their enemy and to deal with what they consider to be an anti-business attitude?
My view on this, George, is people want to see what you do. They're going to judge you by the quality of the judgments you bring to these questions. It's by looking at what we do that we can help earn back the confidence of the business community about the American people as a whole, that we're going to get the right balance of the country.
And no more business tax increases?
Well, the business community always wants their taxes lower. They do. It's understandable. And you could say that's what their job is, to argue for lower taxes. But our job is, again, to make sure we have an economy that is stronger. That's our responsibility. Our responsibility to look out for that public interest.
But finally, on your own future plans, I know you've said many times that you serve at the pleasure of the president. So if he asks you to stay the whole first term, you'll stay?
I will stay as long as he asks me to stay.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, thanks very much.
Nice to see you.
And there is much more of my interview with Secretary Geithner, including his take on the controversial consumer advocate Elizabeth Warren on my Bottom Line blog at abcnews.com/GMA.